A nightmarish hippie cult is on trial for retiring in post-Katrina New Orleans.
Somebody write this.
Hi, and welcome to Somebody Write This, where we use a random plot generator to give us an idea and then brainstorm how that could be a thing somebody might want to write. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Jenny, and to help us with our brainstorming today, we have a guest. Welcome, Bethany Megill.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, you are the second of my sisters that we've had on the podcast, of my many sisters. So I'm glad to have you here because you were one of the ones who did this experiment with me way back when we were writing it on notebooks. And yeah. Actually, before we get into our actual question, I want to ask you the same question I asked Rebecca when she was on. Do you remember any of the stories you wrote when we did this game when we were younger?
I knew you were going to ask that question, and I was even thinking if I had time, I would go run and see if I could find any of the old notebooks and rummage through them. But the only one I remember most distinctly might have been the same one that Becca shared, but I don't remember. It was the one about the scarecrows that you wrote. I think that was yours. That was
mine. Yeah, the scarecrow one was intense.
Yeah.
If you want to go back and listen to that one, folks, that was in episode 2, and I talked about the scarecrow story I wrote. It was an intense one. All right, so what I actually want to talk to you about, Bethany, is you've been doing a sort of a book challenge where you've been sourcing your book suggestions from other people. So talk to me a little bit about what you did. And I think this is your second one. So maybe why you did this, how you did this, how you made the decision to do it this way. Just tell our listeners what you've been doing with that.
Sure. I've always been a big reader, and a couple of years ago, the challenge getting things from people has been kind of I've had two reasons for that. One is because I did a book challenge that I saw some of my library friends post about. That it was an article that said, hey, read a book of these kinds, like read a book that's intimidating and read a book that you were supposed to have read in school and reread one. It was a fun challenge, and I was like, hey, I like reading. I'll go ahead and give that a go. And that was fun to do because I realized for years I've kind of had the same niche of genres that I read. I tend to read a lot of Christian fiction and a lot of young adult dystopian books and a lot of classics, Jane Austen, that kind of thing. And so I was just kind of ready to get out of, those exact genres because I know there are lots more books to read and lots of them are great. So I just kind of wanted to get some new ideas from people on Facebook as a way to make it social, sort of, kind of connecting with people over their choices and actually reading their books and then giving them a review back. So I think it was a year or two ago when I listed 5 categories. I'm trying to remember what they are, but it's an unusual book or something modern fiction, something nonfiction, because that's something that I don't read at all, a book that's by a famous author who's not famous for that book, and I think I might have just said your pick for the other one. I can't remember what the other one is. But anyway, I took 5 suggestions from everybody who wanted to contribute, and I've been reading through those in groups of 5, one from each category, and then I will blog about my review of those. I'm about 3/5 of the way through, and the last section I read through was almost all of those books of the 5. Those were all ones where I made the comment somewhere in there that I probably wouldn't have finished it if I had picked it up on my own. Because one of them was really had lots of crudity in it and vulgarity, and another one was just lots of them were just not my style initially. But it was really interesting to be able to get through those, and it's a book challenge because it was challenging. I had to get into these stories that I wouldn't normally read that are very different than my typical taste. And it was really nice to get to know some different characters. That the one that there was so much vulgarity is in one of the characters, the main guy. I really, really liked him and rooted for him the whole way, so it was worth it. So the last bit was a little tougher than the one before, but I'm definitely glad that I'm doing it and being able to talk to people about their book choices and why they like them and that kind of thing. So it's been fun.
You shared a little bit of this, but yeah, what are maybe 1 or 2 other books that you would never have picked up on your own that you ended up enjoying or getting something out of?
From this challenge specifically?
Yeah, from this challenge specifically.
The one that I specifically mentioned, I'm trying to remember if I can remember the title because the title sounds like the author. I think it's there's an author name and then there's the title, which is the name of the character, and I forget which is which. But I think it's Tim Brown by Mick Foley is the one that it was. Yeah, there's his father character is a horrible person, and he has a very raunchy mouth. But the main kid, like he's surrounded by all these horrible people, and he's like lived through these abusive situations all of his life. But he is like such a likable character, and he's trying to find, he knows the people. He's looking for the good in people around him, and every time he finds someone who he can tell is has good character, he clings to that. And I just remember really liking him as a person, and so I was really glad that I got through that to get to know him as a character.
Is there anything that this challenge has maybe inspired you to seek out more of in your books? Anything like a genre that you realized maybe you like more than you thought, or a style of writing that you think, oh, this is new to me, but I want to check out more of it? How do you think that this might change future reading choices?
I don't know if I could pick a specific genre yet that I'm like, ooh, I'm going to check that out, because I think so far it's been varied enough that I can't necessarily pinpoint genres. I definitely like reading young adult stuff, but I probably should get into more, I've been getting into more adult fiction through this. Oh, one author that I read in the first bit, I read a book by Sarah Dessen, she does young adult, but hers are very realistic teenage fiction. But I've been really getting into her books. Like hers, the one I read by her, Just Listen, was my first I read of her, and she just really has I think she has creative characters, and she tells everything realistically in a way that it feels very natural. And so I've read like 5 of her books since then. So I like her. And I think I would definitely keep doing the challenge again. I like the being able to interact with people on my Facebook and making it something to connect with people over. I like having like a challenge to complete.
Awesome. We got a little bit of a glimpse into who you are as a reader and a storyteller, and that will give us an interesting perspective going on into our actual brainstorming, which we will jump into now. So, as a reminder, our synopsis is a nightmarish hippie cult is on trial for retiring in post-Katrina New Orleans. This is intriguing because there's all kinds of so many reasons. Like, what is this cult? How does this affect post-Katrina New Orleans, where everything is kind of a mess and there's a lot of cleanup and infrastructure happening and a lot of unrest. But mostly, I guess the biggest question to start with is, why does retiring get them in trouble with the law? Like, does retiring have a different meaning in their cult? Like, does that? I don't know.
And the idea that the whole cult is apparently on trial, not just like, say, the leaders.
Right. Is there like a retirement ritual that involves them doing something terrible?
I mean, I feel like maybe I'm making it up, but I feel like in spy stories, retiring is like when you go and kill someone.
Oh, like it's when you are killed.
Like if you go and retire other people.
So maybe they're just murdering.
I was like, I don't know if it means they're retiring from being a cult or if they're going around retiring other people, and that's why they're so nightmarish.
That would make them nightmarish, yes.
That would. Although not particularly hippie.
Right.
Which tends to lay more pacifist.
Fit. Like, I was thinking nightmarish hippie cult, just that phrase by itself, and I kind of got like the Burbs meets Woodstock vibe. Like, so they're weird, like Addams Family. They're nightmarish, but they're nice people.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I guess the question right now is, were they nightmarish before they retired? Or is it like, are they retiring their hippie ways and becoming violent and becoming nightmarish? Because you would think that nightmarishness retiring would be good.
Yes.
So that's what I'm wondering. Maybe this is, I don't know, maybe that they were always like had this potential, but they've decided to step back from maybe previous cult teachings.
I'm so confused. It's what's confusing is the group dynamic. The fact the whole group, because you have like a cult, you have to assume there's people of like all ages in there.
Well, how big is it? This could be a cult of like 7 people.
I guess that's true.
And so it could be like a group of maybe just a tight-knit group of like maybe 8 to 10 people.
And they just choose New Orleans.
This is where my mind is heading, and it can be removed wherever. But but I think bringing in this post-Katrina New Orleans thing is interesting as well. Because that, this is a time where where there was a lot of demand for people to step up in supporting things and in providing better funding for rebuilding and that kind of thing. And so I'm wondering, I'm leaning toward this, that they have this very much like, we bring peace to the world through being peaceful ourselves. Right. And then they see like their community torn apart and nobody's nobody's doing anything about it. And so they retire their original peaceful plans.
Okay.
And maybe they start violently protesting, or maybe they start taking down people who they see as hindering the reconstruction of the state. Maybe they completely lose their minds and go after somebody who really has no connection to this. Maybe they decide, maybe their beliefs make them think that somebody in particular, like, it controls the weather or something. Like, maybe they get stuck on this weird conspiracy where, like, where they think that this has been specifically targeted to them and they go after them. But it becomes, so I don't know, like, that's kind of where I'm leaning, is that, like, so you bring in the chaotic scene of post-Katrina New Orleans, and you bring in this hippie cult dynamic, and you bring in the retiring being illegal in some way.
So in your scenario, the cult was already based in New Orleans.
I think so.
Because I was leaning a different way.
Okay.
Like, they go down there there to retire.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because it's a cult.
That's their vacation home.
We can, well, no. You can give them all kinds of, we don't know what their beliefs are. Like, we could put anything in there. Mm-hmm. And so, like, what if they're retiring in the sense of, so whatever the cult was about, wherever they were based before, it's time, like, not necessarily retiring as in they're not going to do it anymore, but like a major change in what they do.
Yeah.
And part of that involves post-Katrina New Orleans has been, like, devastated. I'm thinking immediately post-Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking stuff
like
has been destroyed and
like
washed out and whatever. And they come and take over, like, a city block or something. Well, it's all broken. Nobody needs it anymore. Right? What do you?
They move into the mess and decide to, maybe they think of it as retiring from their layperson lives and stepping up into the leadership of bringing this.
Maybe like Katrina was the sign they were waiting for, and this is where you will build the new kingdom.
I like that. What do you think, Bethany?
That's interesting. The other
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that puts a different fun twist on it. The one thing that's running through my head is that you could have them being on trial by the legal courts, but, like, if it's a big enough cult, and it's hard to do this because it says that the whole cult is on trial, but if somehow you have it, you could possibly have it so that these people are out of line from the cult by retiring, and, like, the cult leaders, if it's, like, big enough, they're putting them on trial, like, through their weird cultish ritual of,
interesting.
Like, you're not allowed to retire from the cult.
Either they're acting out by being less hippie-ish or by taking
because maybe they were supposed to do, like, what I said, like, it's been destroyed, go and build a new, like we're branching
build our
out
new
now.
utopia. Yeah,
right. And so there'll be two of us or more, like, we don't know how many they already have, so they're just a branch of the cult. And because they get there and decide, instead of taking over, maybe they're going to help or something, like, they decide, okay, now's our chance to leave the cult. And now the actual cult is after them.
Yes.
You could do some interesting stuff with playing with perspective there, in starting with, like, if they're former cult members, maybe a lot of, like, the cult rituals and language is still part of them. So as we first meet them, they seem like they are the nightmarish hippie cult. Like, they are the bad guys. Uh-huh. And then and it seems like the folks who are putting them on trial, who are sentencing them, are the normal ones, the ones like us. And then it becomes clearer as we go on that our sympathies are supposed to lie in the other direction. And that might be really interesting, playing with how that looks. I do have to pause because we have a title and I don't know what to do with it. Because this sounds like a children's book now. Because our title is Meet an Unusually Brave Mouse. Which is clearly a children's book about a mouse who is brave and teaches children how to be brave, and that does not jive well with a nightmare hippie cult.
It doesn't.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, go, Bethany, go.
This might not make any sense. Okay, so the way that makes it work for me is if the people who are on trial are the protagonists and they're moving out of they go down there as their cult tribe or whatever to take over New Orleans, and then they end up seeing that they're not supposed to do it, whatever, and they end up retiring their evil ways, I guess, and then they're on trial. The main leader of it could be like they all have nicknames in cults, like she's either called Mouse or her name like means mouse or something.
Or like maybe the title mouse, like there's different levels of authority.
And maybe she's like really tense, like maybe she has like some kind of personality that's unlikely to be the rebel of the group, but she ends up taking And she ends up kind of leading a bunch of that. And then like you could call it meat. You could call it that, which is kind of a weird title. But like maybe
that means
even
because
says
hippies have nature names anyway. You can have Violet and Feather and Mouse.
I was on the same wavelength of trying to think of it as something to do with their cult language and the dialogue that they use. I wondered, and this doesn't necessarily have to go against that. I wondered as well if it was like a phrase that they used and it meant somebody who had no power standing up to those in power kind of thing.
Well,
and
that's an unusually brave mouse.
Yes. And so at first, like their initial goal was for them to be the unusually brave mice standing up against the terror of the world that they were trying to turn upside down. And now maybe it's this offshoot that is trying to stand up against the cult who is doing what they're not supposed to do. I don't think that those have to be incompatible. Maybe they are. Maybe their cult is modeled after mice, and maybe the mouse is an important symbol to them as a symbol of something very small that can cause big reactions, or something.
True. Strength in numbers and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I like the idea of like say that there's I don't know like a growing up ritual or like an initiation ritual when you like first officially become part of the tribe, and they give you like your nickname or your title or your adjective or something, and so they would say something along the lines of once the main chick was presented, they say meet and then usually brave mouse, and that's like how to welcome her, and maybe that's not who she is. Maybe that's who she becomes. I don't know. I was like, you could have it be a different name and adjective at the beginning, and then change it as she grows. And
this is fascinating.
I think that could be really interesting.
Like
yeah, no, I like that. I love the idea of it, being a ritual phrase of some sort. And I love this, today we meet an unusually brave mouse and they bring the next graduate forward or whatever. Yeah. And then it becomes something that this offshoot can kind of reclaim in their stance against this group that they have now realizing does not have, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe good intentions. And trying to stand up for themselves despite being very much in the minority. And seemingly without power.
Because they'd be fighting both the city and the mother cult.
Yeah.
Oh,
and wow. I like how repositioning it to be about the cult exiters, the ex-cult people trying to fight the cult, because that puts the emphasis back on the trial. Because originally when we were looking at it, it was kind of, the focus was on what the retiring did, but I like that this can make the trial the centerpiece of it. Right. That they are being accused and being condemned for what they're doing as they're trying to either change people's minds or bring in somebody who can kick this group out.
and I love the element here of the personal struggle involved. Right. Whoever we decide our protagonist is, because it's a person who obviously has these beliefs, or they wouldn't be in the cult, they wouldn't go on the mission to New Orleans to take it over, and then to decide what they believe versus what they don't, and what they choose to do about that.
Yeah. So it might even be interesting for one of the folks to do this. Okay, so say this cult wasn't originally based in New Orleans. They were based elsewhere and then moved to New Orleans partly to take advantage of the fact that it was in a state of unrest to set up their new dominion, whatever it might be. Right. So maybe
people
one
are lost and confused, and come join us. We just
Exactly. So maybe one of the people was originally from New Orleans and this is her home. and the way that they're talking about it, that they're talking about the people there, maybe that's what kind of prompts her. I'm going to say her because we haven't had nearly enough female characters in our stories yet. Right. Yeah. That is what prompts her to step away from it. That seeing her own home and the people that she lived with portrayed a certain way by the cult or spoken of as if they are just there to be fodder for the cult's dream. Yeah. That's what pushes her out. And so you could have this very deep connection for her, this cultural connection for her, and then the warped view of it that the cult has. And
and vice versa, having somebody who was maybe raised in the cult come to New Orleans and meet the first gal and see the warped vision of what her cult looks like to the people of New Orleans.
Yeah.
And so this cross of viewpoints would be fascinating to explore. Yeah,
I like that.
We are right at time to wrap this up, but
and that was a perfect way to wrap it. I want somebody to write this now.
This one, I like this one because it feels a little bit more, a lot of the ones that we do are silly and fun and adventurous. And this one feels like, even though it's got these sort of, these adventure-y trappings, I feel like there's something that could really be discussed here. That it could have substance and depth to it in a way that, not that our others can't, but this one feels a little bit more grounded in deeper thought, which is really interesting.
Yeah, a little weightier.
Yeah. Which I like. I like having that variety.
Wow.
Then we're going to leave that to you, viewers. If something in this inspires you, write something and send it to us, and we will share it. And I would love to hear people's takes on this and how they respond to this. So before we close out today, we will each take a second. We'll share out a story we think our listeners should check out. Today, I think I'm going to share, I don't share a lot of TV shows, so I'm going to share one that I was not initially into, but my husband was. And I started watching it with him kind of casually and kind of fell in love with it. And that's Steven Universe. Which, if you haven't checked it out, it's a kid's cartoon. The episodes are like 10, 15 minutes long. But and it starts off as a very silly Monster of the Week kind of story. And then as it goes on, it has one of the most incredible narrative arcs of a cartoon ever. It gets into some really fascinating world building. It has a bunch of amazing characters. And toward, especially as it gets on, it deals with a lot of really intense questions about dealing with terrible things that people around you are doing and how to be the one who's standing up for the right thing and what happens when you run out of strength to do that. And it's a show where the characters are given the opportunity to be in the best possible light. That there's such a sense of optimism about a possible way forward out of darkness.
Nice.
And that's something that I find it very refreshing. It doesn't hide from the darkness. It doesn't hide from things being bad, but it has such optimism about we can find a way if we do what we need to do and we take steps to help things and we are the right people and we're doing the right things, that it makes a difference and that people are capable of that. I found it very refreshing and very encouraging, so I highly recommend it. If you haven't checked it out, most of it's on Hulu. It just finished, and I highly, highly recommend it. I'm going to toss it over to Jenny. What would you like to share with us today?
I'm going to recommend another TV show. I've been going through old favorites lately and introducing my roommate to new TV shows to binge, and we just finished watching all 8 seasons of Monk. Now, if you have not watched the show, I recommend it to anybody. It's starring and produced by Tony Shalhoub, Academy Award winner. He's been in a lot of stuff, and the show is about a detective who is recovering from the trauma of losing his wife to a car bomb. So he left the force, and now he's working as a private consultant in order to earn money. But he's a very unusual man with a lot of phobias and obsessions and compulsions that he has to deal with. It is exaggerated for comedic effect, but I think the show does a really good job at balancing the comedy of that with real emotion and real attention to the struggles that he goes through. And I think the show's a pretty good, even though it reaches parody level proportions with some of the issues, I think it's a really good show about neurodiversity and finding your own strengths even if you don't do what everybody else does, and finding your own little joys in life and how to get through struggles and friendships and all kinds of things. And it's just one of my favorite shows ever. Go watch it.
Awesome. All right, Bethany, it's on to you. What would you like to share?
Okay, as people who know me would be expecting me to talk about The Scarlet Pimpernel, which is a book I'm obsessed with, but I'm actually more obsessed with the character than the book. So instead, I'm going to recommend a series that I recently just reread, which is, I don't know if it's dystopian, but I think of it as dystopian, and it is young adult. I recently reread the series The Quartet for the Giver by Lois Lowry. I know a lot of people have read The Giver. I don't know how many people know that there are 3 other books following it. But The Giver has always been one of my favorite examples of some kind of a dystopian world where people create this community of rituals and all these things to create the safety and keep people from feeling the way that they're supposed to be feeling. And anyway, The Giver in itself is an amazing book that I think is it's very simplistic, and it doesn't overcomplicate itself with political agendas as some of the other ones tend to do. I think I love the simplicity of it and the story of Jonas as he's trying to figure out his journey into learning things about what the world was like and things that their community is missing out on. The second book in the quartet is Gathering Blue. The third one is Messenger, and the fourth one is Sun. And the interesting thing about the series is that each one focuses on a different character in a different community and culture, but they all still kind of connect, especially by the end. The second one is about a girl, her name's either Kara or Kyra, I can't remember, in a different community, and then book 3 takes a character who showed up in book 2 and has him as the protagonist, and he ends up being in the village where the character in book 1 has ended up by the end of the book, and then book 4 has somebody who showed up in book 1 as well. It's all kind of intertwined, but I'm really intrigued by the way that each book has different communities with different cultures and different ways that they do the names for the characters. Book 3 and 4 kind of have like some villains that are involved that get resolved, and again, I'm trying not to do anything too spoilery, but
that sounds like some complex world building.
Yeah, it very much is.
Yeah, and I just think it's really well done. I think the first one is my favorite, but number 3 is my second. And I think it's just a really good quartet. And if anybody really liked the first one, even if you're not as into sequels, I would definitely recommend going and checking out the other 3, because I think it's a really good conclusion to the story with lots of added depth and characterization to it, which I like.
Nice.
Sweet. All right, before we close things out, Bethany, is there anything that you want to share for our listeners for yourself? Any blogs or work that you're doing that you'd like to let our listeners know about?
I do have a blog. The web address for it is bethanymegill.com, which is fairly easy. The title of the blog is Cheerful Bamblings of What's-Her-Face. I don't write on it too often as much as I used to, but I do upload movie reviews when I do movie challenges and my book reviews and occasional other blogs that I post. I have a lot of backlog. I just I haven't written very consistently as of late, but I do put my book reviews up there whenever I finish my section. So yeah, if anybody wants to give that a look, I've got all the past ones I've written so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Bethany. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. This was fun to do.
Good. All right, folks, that is our episode. As a reminder, you can find us every other Thursday wherever you get your podcasts.
Follow us on Twitter at WriteThisPod. And if you've been inspired by this episode and have questions or comments or knock jokes or anything else, email us at somebodywritethis@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. See you then.
And as they say, let your ear hear what comes out of your mouth.